Yeah, I think we can start with the online course. Yeah, very welcome, the audience, to the online Green ICT online course with the title Hide and Seek Electronic Waste in the In-Vitro Diagnostics Industry. Very welcome. Before we start with the presentation, I would like to give some information. We would like to record this presentation, only this presentation, and the discussion will not record it. And if you have some question, we would like to answer a question part after this presentation, you can use with the microphone, or you can use also the chat. Before we start with the presentation or with the lecture from Maïwenn, I would like to give the short intro to Green ICT. I would like to my name is Hans Walter. I came from Research Fab Microelectronics Germany, FMD, or the Forschungsfabrik Mikroelektronik, and I'm involved in the big project Green ICT at FMD. It should be a center of excellence for the resource-optimized information and communication technology. As a big project, the live runtime started in August 2022 and is finished in January next year. And in this project involved 11 different Fraunhofer institutes from Germany and the Leibniz Institute and IHP. And you find more details on the website www.greenict.de. What is the goal of this project? You can see here, we would like to give the environmental expertise that we have some research activities. Research activities means we have 3 different hubs. The first means the sensor edge cloud system. The second is the energy saving communication network and the resource optimized microelectronics production. And we would like to give some answer on the urgent question. What are the resource energy consumption, life cycle assessment, and so on. We would like to give some answers for the very important question. And the main part should be also what we do now is the education and trainee program. That we also have the trainee and education program. You can see here also some topics. The trainee program at the Green ICT as the ecological sustainability questions, life cycle assistance, circular economy, all of the topics what we use for the Green ICT electronics or the microelectronics production, development, using. We have also the education and qualification program that you can find also on the website greenict.de in the English version with further information. There's some modules. And that was from my side for the introduction Green ICT at FMD and the education program. And now you come for our presentation from Maïwenn Kersaudy-Kerhoas with the title Hide and Seek Electronic Waste in the In-Vitro Diagnostic Industry. Before we start with the presentation, I would like to give the short introduction. Professor Maïwenn Kersaudy-Kerhoas has been academic director of the Global Research Institute in Health and Care Engineering and at the Heriot-Watt University since 2022. The research topics are the lab on chips, is the sustainability on the medical devices and the microfluidics and so on. Prior, she was professor of the microfluidic engineering at the same institute from 2020 and has been an associate professor from 1970 to 2020. He has also worked some years ago from 2018 to 2021 on the honorary lecture and was also honorary fellow at the University of Edinburgh on the section of the infectious medicine. This is both at her academic career began at the Heriot University, and she worked as a lecture assistant professor and also on the Royal Academy of Engineering Research following until 2018. You can find more details on the website from Maïwenn. And now I would like to start with the presentation, and Maïwenn, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much for the invitation to speak, Hans and Manuel, in this Green ICT program. Before we start on this presentation about electronic waste in the IVD industry, I just want to give a little bit more context about my journey. So I graduated with a double master in electronics and micro and nanotechnologies from the engineering school ISEN in France and the University of Lille in north of France. So for my first 4 years at university, I did not do research at all, but for the final year, I had the chance to take this MSc course run by the University of Lille with the IEMN, the Institute of Electronic, Microelectronic and Nanotechnologies. And there I learned how photolithography used in the electronic industry could be applied to make microchannels able to handle microliters of fluids for medical purpose. And I became completely fascinated with the possibility to manipulate the living matter onto non-organic surfaces. And I found a PhD at Hertford University in Edinburgh in Scotland in biomems and lab on a chip. And exploring the concept of miniaturizing the equipment found in a typical laboratory and integrating these onto centimeter scale device that can be, in theory, used everywhere, and so open diagnostics to remote population or speed up time to results elsewhere. So once in Hertford and reading more of the literature, I realized that in the past 10 years before I started, so roughly, sort of, early 2000s onwards, researchers had created fantastic new biosensors using electromechanical principles, but none of these sensors, or very, very few of them, could actually handle raw materials coming out of a human, or an animal for that matter. So I decided to focus on sample preparation or pre-analytics to bridge the gap between the raw samples and the analytical detection of targets in the samples. And in doing that, I also moved away from the clean room and photolithography associated with the electronics industry and developed an ultra-fast prototyping method using a layer-by-layer cutting of acrylic sheets and a solvent-assisted thermal bonding methods. And there were several reasons to this. One, unlike photolithography, which could take days, if not weeks, to get the device prepared, the ultra-fast approach enabled a full or even several design-to-test cycles in a matter of a single day, so massively accelerating our research. And everything I designed was touching blood, and it became obvious that cleaning very small channels where you had pumped blood at fairly high pressures was complicated and not really desirable. So disposable chips had to be used for convenience, for repeatability and reliability, and to avoid cross-contamination. So I focused on preparing samples to extract a particular type of biomarkers called cell-free DNA or circulating DNA. And some of the chips that I've developed in the last 20 years or so are presented around these slides. But since making my very first chip, which is the one at the bottom left on this slide, I was very concerned by the environmental impact of my work. Indeed, all of these devices are plastic and single use, and I started using quite a lot of them and producing waste in the lab. And I thought if produced in millions, which is what you hope when starting a new design, this would also leave behind a lot of the waste. But taking a step back and looking around at the IVD industry, I'm of course no different from the rest of the sector. So on the top left here are my devices, and there are also some examples illustrating the range of sort of mainstream diagnostic kits used worldwide, from infectious disease to blood gas measurements. And of course, the commonality between all of them are that they're all plastic and single use. So what sort of production scale are we talking about? So if we take the gene experts, so the COVID-19 gene experts cartridge produced by CFI during the pandemic, this is only one of by 20 different cassettes that they have. they produced 24 million in 2020. So that's about more than 1.5 kilotons of plastic per year, and that's not even counting the packaging, and that's only one of 20 that they produce. Another example, let's take the humble lateral flow test. Conservative estimates before the pandemic was that 2 billions were produced annually. That translates into 40 kilotons of plastics per year, and that's including now the packaging that comes with this test. So it is clear that the diagnostic industry adds to an already under-addressed problem, the issue of medical waste. I don't know if you've come across these stats, but if the global health industry was ranked as a country amongst other countries, it would be the 5th largest polluter in the world. And diagnostic waste is small, maybe anything between 5 to 20%, but it's a significant addition to this burden. And the use of point-of-care diagnostics has seen an exponential rise, which is fueled by several socioeconomic drivers, including emerging disease threats like COVID, Ebola, monkeypox, increased demand for self-testing. So I've been to my pharmacy recently, and on the counter, I saw about 10 tests on everything from prostate cancer, menopause, celiac disease, and others. And that illustrates how mainstream these tests have become. And the environmental problem associated to the use of these devices are linked to the use of virgin petrochemical plastics, the great transport distance associated with the manufacturing, pollution from suboptimal incineration when these are incinerated, but also exposure to toxic compounds from the reagents found in these devices. And I would also like to point out that so-called digitization effort across the globe have taken diagnostic out of the hospital labs into community settings, into our own homes. And it is, in fact, part of an effort to decarbonize by reducing patients' transport to hospitals. But it's also created, this crisis around waste as an unintended consequences. So I've started asking myself the question, are these devices part of the problem or part of the solution? And it's not just plastic waste. In many of these devices, you also find electronic waste. So, for example, in the iStat device that is produced by Abbott, and which enables the detection of blood gases, coagulation factors, etc., we find 2 biosensors chips as shown in this sort of blow-up version of the iStat device. So there's no sales or distribution data available publicly, so I don't know exactly what is the scale, but these devices are in usage in over 120 countries, so that gives us a feel for the usage already. And so these electrodes, these biosensor chips include electrodes microfabricated on silicon, so there might be also metal, possibly even rare metal associated with these. And typically they would be landfilled or even incinerated, and they only have a functional lifetime of a few minutes. But then even if we take the example of the humble lateral flow test that we used during a pandemic, we come to be a little bit surprised. So together with a collaborator at the University of Edinburgh, we selected and dismantled 21 different COVID test kits, and we categorized their parts. This work is now published by the WHO Bulletin. In fact, it came out this month. This enabled us to understand the commercial baseline for material usage And we uncovered huge variations in material usage and really interesting trends. But in doing so, we also came across these tests. The Elum COVID test, which was sold during the pandemic. And we did the teardown for that device, and we found a single-use PCB and single-use lithium battery button. And I was really shocked at the time by finding these, and it just seems an aberration, especially as all the other tests did not include electronics, and this was, the one that included electronics. And interestingly, in the process of opening these tests, we found this was the actually hardest to open. So the chances of people actually removing the battery button from the device, I think is quite low. But then I thought, should we have been surprised at all? Because in fact, digital lateral flow tests have been around for some time, particularly in the pregnancy test market. So the pregnancy test, like the Elum COVID test, include a microprocessor enabling the reading of the color change with optical sensors, a single-use PCB, and a battery button. In fact, sometimes two battery buttons, as I found out by opening a test myself. So again, what is the scale of the problem? In the UK, there might be anywhere between 4 to 12 million pregnancy self-tests carried out annually. And so the question is, where does this waste end up? So first of all, what does the manufacturer say? So this is a snapshot of the information sheet that you find in a pregnancy test. And there is a small print at the back of the page there about disposal. And so it says that the battery has to be removed, and it gives some instructions on how to do that. And then it says that the rest of the stick should be disposed in a recycling scheme for electrical equipment. So in Scotland, essentially that means in Edinburgh, I have to book an appointment with the recycling centre to be able to dispose of my used pregnancy test correctly. And I also want to mention, it also says dispose of in accordance with local regulations. And that's something we've seen on many diagnostic tests, and something my colleague Ali Street in Edinburgh has been writing about. This is very much pushing the responsibility of the disposal onto the users. Now, it's normal that you couldn't have all national guidance written in these IFUs for products that are sold all over the world, but nevertheless, it's really difficult for users to understand what to do, whether you're somebody at home or even a laboratory worker or a hospital worker. But also, imagine if you're a woman testing if you're pregnant. This is perhaps the most life-changing event in your life. And some women might be really excited, some women might be scared, some women might not have chosen to be in a state of pregnancy at all, and might have even suffered rape and violence. So last thing you want is to have to read the instructions on how to dispose of the evidence of your test and state, and least of all, driving to a disposal or recycling center. So it goes in a bin, battery, PCB and all. I think we don't have data, but the fraction of women who would actually open the test and remove the battery and recycle the battery and the electronics is really small. So again, the scale of the problem, there's nearly 1 million conceptions in the UK. There's 12.5 million home pregnancy tests completed each year. That's about 13 devices per live birth. and similar number of about 5 devices per live birth in the US. So even if the digital tests are only 5% of the market, there's many million of tests going to the landfill, and this is just one example amongst others. So where does the problem start? It starts at the design stage. So the environmental impact is often locked in at the design stage and the decision that you make at the design phase. So let's take a step back and maybe think, do we actually need an electronic reader? Could we not have something ultra simple like this flushable pregnancy test invented in the US? This was actually invented for privacy reasons, but it turned out to be made completely out of cellulose and fantastic for environmental impact. But it's not so simple. In fact, I discovered recently that the medical campus is quite against the use of lateral flow assay in the first place. And here in the bubble is a verbatim from a manager of point-of-care diagnostic services in a major Scottish hospital. And essentially, what this person is saying is that LFA's lateral flow assays are difficult to interpret. Is there a line? Is there no line? Sometimes it's very hard to tell. And depending on how good your vision are, you might say, one thing or the other. And indeed, a medical professional might have different answers to potentially life-changing diagnostic tests. And that's what has been marketed by the Clear Blue test, the Clear Blue digital pregnancy test when it came back. Its results in words, that is to say, in this case, pregnant or not pregnant, but it could also be HIV or no HIV or similar results, life-changing results. And in this case, it's also giving you more of a quantitative value as well and tells you the number of weeks you're pregnant. And similarly, you might have a quantitation desirable for HIV test or other type of test. So electronic reading is a way to eliminate the result interpretation while still benefiting from the low-cost approach. And LFA format has been massively popularized by the pandemic, and a large population has been made familiar with using self-testing at home. So they are here to stay, and I've alluded to the fact of finding 10 different lateral flow tests at my pharmacy recently. And then there's a new category of tests coming on the market as well, and these are the nucleic acid amplification tests. So not just immunoassays working on antibody antigen, like the COVID test, but actually detecting fragments of DNA in minute samples like urine, blood, saliva, etc. And again, with those tests, you might an electronic reading might be desirable. So the move towards the digital interpretation of lateral flow devices is well supported in the literature, and here I've put a few examples. They relate mainly to the use of machine learning to interpret and could work from visual data rather than electronic data. But it does articulate quite well the problem, which is that these tests are subjective to human interpretation of a test line by eye, and that increases the risk of false positive and false negatives, and that the new technologies would be really useful to automate the interpretation of the test, reduce human error, also improve sensitivity and accuracy, and essentially transforming what was qualitative test into a quantitative test. So what are the solutions for next generation digital diagnostic devices? So first of all, there is the possibility to, outside electronic consideration, look into packaging material consideration, and that's something I've got a great interest in. For example, the housing use virgin plastic from the petrochemical industry. And for several years now, I have challenged the industry on exactly this. Do we really need virgin materials? So round about the time that we did the teardown projects of the 21 different tests, we reverse engineered the cassettes distributed by the NHS, and we molded the cassettes in various recycled materials, including post-consumer and post-industrial waste. And that included exotic materials like recycled shrink gum, recycled limestone, recycled white goods like washing machines, etc. And I even have a collaboration now with a leather company producing a laser-based post-industrial waste material. And so here is an image of the test that we have produced, and we are now running some tests of these devices, so both mechanical tests as well as biological characterization of these devices. And on device without electronics, this could remove 40 to 80% of the carbon footprint of the devices. However, on devices with electronics, tackling the PCB is an obvious choice. So, for example, one could look at the use of soluble PCBs from companies like Jiva, and I believe Mahmoud Waghi from the University of Glasgow have shared some of his research in similarly eco-friendly PCB solutions in the last Green ICT seminar. And perhaps the greatest concern of all in digital diagnostic devices is the battery button. So there are several possible solutions there, including the use of kinetic industry that has already been developed for things like doorbell button and remote controls, etc. But there is no reason that it could not apply to this situation. It's not so different from sort of a remote control, the digital pregnancy test. But this has not been done before, as far as I know. There's also the possibility to use solar panels. In particular, I would like to highlight French technology Dracula, which is able to harvest light in low light setting, for example, indoor, etc. And there's also the possibility of using RF transmission, which has been covered again by Mahmoud Waghi in his presentation. So I see several outstanding challenges. First, we need a better quantification of the problem. So I have started doing that, but we also need life cycle analysis of these devices, both for non-digital as well as digital tests. And we need survey about the use of these devices across the world. Then we also need technology demonstration. This is really important, and this should come from university centers as well as centers like Fraunhofer, because often the industry do not have the margins to enable this sort of R&D and this sort of leap forward. So we have a lot of the building blocks. So we know we can mold recycled plastic, we know we have this new type of PCBs, and we know have energy harvesting solutions, but we need to integrate them, and we need to do that as soon as possible. And finally, we need to keep an eye on regulations as well as laws and policy. And there's a few things to say there. So there are changes in upcoming regulations, for example, around the use of non-rechargeable batteries. There's always the question whether the medical sector could be exempt. I don't think so, although there will always there should always be some caveats on a case-by-case basis. And in the UK, and there might be similar plans in Europe as well, the NHS will impose by April 2028 product level requirements in terms of carbon footprints. And that will have a first on market effect, I think. And if Europe wants to compete and have these devices chosen during procurement, it needs to come up with the solution right now. And that's why also assembly demonstration and demo products, etc., are incredibly important and should be delivered as soon as possible. And there might also be needs for new regulations or amendments to new regulation. So, for example, for the new soluble PCB, could we get rid of the fire safety recommendation, given that these devices are only turned on for 10 minutes in their lifetime? And similarly, there might be provision for particular type of batteries or particular type of electrical power. And I think these will need a revision to encompass battery-less solutions. So all in all, I hope that this has opened your eye on the problems associated with electronic waste in IVD industry, and you might have learned about things you didn't expect. And I hope that some of colleagues attending this talk, can help in demonstrating sort of the next generation of devices and environmentally friendly devices in the IVD industry. So I'll stop there, and thank you all very much.